call the special meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order for Tuesday the 19th of February 2019.
And I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Board of Finance on this Tuesday, February 9th.
Please join us in the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alrighty then. We have a number of presentations tonight. Why don't we call up the registrars of voters first, Department 330?
Sure.
And then we'll go to library.
I'm currently waiting for.
Oh, okay, all right. All right, no hurry.
So we do have I'm Nancy Ryan,
Tim Beeble.
registrars of voters, for those who don't know. And you have our proposal there in your little electronic devices.
Yeah, as you can see, for the 5th year in a row, we're coming in asking for less money than the current year. So what we're proposing is for 2020 fiscal year is $99,650, which is about 9.5% less than what was budgeted for fiscal year 2015. And through the years, we've just been coming up with ways of administering elections and doing registrations at lower costs and lower manpower. And so each year we manage to dial it down. But
So this proposal for the fiscal year 2020 includes an election, two referendums and a primary. And
No, the other way around.
Actually, two primaries and a referendum.
One referendum, yeah, so we're,
You can do either one.
in this go-round, we're going to be we're back to a presidential primary again in 2020. That'll happen in April 2020, so it's
it'll be
part of this budget.
yeah.
And it may very well be both, certainly the Democratic Party will have a primary. Who knows, the Republicans may have a primary too, so.
So we had to figure that into that 2020, because it falls within that fiscal year. And as Tim said, we continue to track our expenses and find ways of saving some money, but sometimes time for us in being able to do things in a more efficient manner. There is lots of legislation being tossed around. Tim is now on the legislative committee. He's been on the legislative committee for our professional organization. He's been up in Hartford a few times, keeping track of all that. And there's no way for us to know if any of that legislation is going to go anywhere and how it will affect us financially. So we can't really, if we knew, we'd have that reflected in our proposal, but as it goes, we have no idea where any of it's gonna go. Some of it may just be changing some things that they think will work better. Some of it may have a cost effect on us. We just don't know.
And kind of as an example, one of the things that we had done over the past couple of years to save the cost of administering elections is we have learned that we can program the tabulators to read two different ballots, have it go through the same tabulator. So in Berry School, where we have both District 3 and 5, as well as in Municipal Center, we have District 1 and 4, we can hold those elections in the same room and only have one tabulator. If we only have one tabulator, that means we only need one moderator for the room and only 2 assistant registrars for the room. If we had 2 tabulators, we end up having to have additional tabulator tenders, as well as a moderator, as well as the assistant registrars. And that saves about $2,000 every election event. In addition, when we do the referendum votes, we had learned how to merge the streets for District 3 and 5. And so in doing that, I mean, District 3 is a very small district. It has what, about 550?
District, yeah.
District 5 has 550 voters, and meanwhile in District 3 is more like, what, 3,500 or 45? So we end up, if you can keep them separate, the people working on the District 5 side don't have a lot to do. And meanwhile, on the other side of the room, people in District 3 are working like hell with having all these people coming in. So by merging the streets, everyone comes in, checks in together, and we end up saving on a checker. And so that would save another, say, $450 for.
On top of that, 2,000.
On top of the 2,000 when it comes to referendums. And the reason I'm going through this is not only to tell you how we've figured out ways to save money, but also some of the pending legislation up in Hartford would impact our ability to do that. And one of the things they're proposing, a law usually comes about because there was a problem somewhere. So there was a problem in Hamden. And in Hamden, they had 2 districts in one room, and they made a mistake and gave out, oh, I'm sorry, not Hamden, Stratford. They gave out the wrong ballots. So people in one district got the ballots from the adjoining district that's in the same room. It created, and the vote was so close that the results of that election is in the courts right now. So as a result, there's now a proposal from the Secretary of State's office that no one can have one tabulator read 2 different ballots.
Or 3 different ballots, or.
Yeah, and there's no, and frankly, as long as you keep, the machine isn't responsible for getting this wrong. It was the ballot clerk that was giving out the wrong ballot, and it was the moderator that handed the ballot clerk the wrong stack of ballots.
Mhm.
So again, they're coming up with a way of solving it which really doesn't approach the direct problem, but kind of catching it after the fact.
Well,
But again, that would stop us from being able to save this couple $1,000s each time around.
Well, it's kind of like the Secretary of State's, actually, it wasn't the Secretary of State, the legislature came up with this idea of a regional election moderator.
Right, right.
Because of one city in
Yep.
one council, one COG area that had a problem, and it's not really provided value to anybody else, so,
Yeah, that was in Hartford.
yeah.
That was where the problem is, where the registrars are paid $80,000 a year.
And so, in doing this combination, we're very, very careful of where things get divided and how they get divided.
Mhm.
So the tabulator's the last stop on the way out of the room, so we'll make sure that there's 2 separate ballot clerks handing out 2 separate ballots, 2 separate lines of people checking in, and they don't converge until they get to that tabulator. So there's a way of making sure that people get the right
Mhm.
ballots and that things are separated properly. In a referendum type thing, it doesn't really matter, all the ballots are the same. And in either a state or a municipal election, a state, federal, or municipal election, they want those results separately. In a lot of cases, we have to have them separately because you've got legislative seats that are different. You know, we've got 2 different House representatives, 2 different Senate representatives to the state here. They have to get the right votes from the right people. So we make sure that happens. In the situation that Tim was mentioning about Stratford, rather than passing a law that everybody has to do this, maybe make sure the training happens properly and the setup happens properly, et cetera. Because there's many, many towns who started with X number of tabulators prior to redistricting, and then ended up needing more after redistricting because of the way the districts were, instead of getting more, they came up with the idea of putting more, several ballots, types of ballots into one tabulator, having the programming done ahead of time, and they didn't have to go out and spend a couple $1,000s a piece on a tabulator. So that, we already have them. We wouldn't have to go out and buy new ones, but we would like to not have that happen. But we won't know until the legislature does their thing. Tim's testified a few times, and other members of our organization have testified to try to keep that from going forward. And again, like I said, other legislation, we just don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah, one other
We'll
piece
see.
is election day registration. So over the past few years, we've been required to allow people on election day to register if they're not currently registered, and then vote. And we generally hold it in this room for the entire town. There is a proposal in Hartford that the towns be required to have election day registration in each polling place.
Right.
So, and there are a couple of problems with this. First of all, the cost. The cost would be basically triple, because the staffing that we have for here, we would have to duplicate in Stony Hill and also Berry School. The other issue we have is you'd have people in line at these polling places that would include people who are registered to vote and people who aren't registered to vote. So you end up having a real mess there. But more importantly, if you're not registered to vote, how would you know which polling place you're supposed to go to in order to register? It's a whole lot easier if you tell people centrally, if you live in Bethel and you want to register to vote on election day, you come here. If you have to tell people in Bethel, oh, well, you might have to go to one of 3 places, and, good luck finding it. But,
Okay.
so that's another one. And then the last thing that I'm sure you've all heard of is that in Hartford, they're pushing for a constitutional amendment to allow early voting.
Mhm.
And I know Matt's been to some cost meetings about this sort of thing. And unfortunately, the legislature isn't giving a hint as to what it will be. They just want the constitutional amendment so then they can draft something. So you'll be voting on this constitutional amendment without knowing what it's going to be. We don't know whether it'll be 3 days of early voting or 2 weeks of early voting. And we've suggested to Matt that it would probably cost about $1,000 a day to have this administered.
So that type of thing isn't gonna happen right away. It probably wouldn't be able to be on a ballot until 2020.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we're not looking at having to, and we don't know at that time whether it's a 2-step process, pass the constitutional amendment and then create legislation as to what the early voting is gonna be. Until that happens, we won't know how to do any costs down the road. So we'll just have to wait and see on that and see
Well,
what.
yeah,
they come up with.
those aren't gonna affect your budget this year. though.
No, definitely not.
Yes.
And one thing we've been able to expend on, or save on too, is our annual canvas, which is happening right now. We're required by state statute to run a canvas between January and the end of April of the voting list to just kind of clean it up. And we found a way that each year we kind of find a way to make it a little bit, not smaller, but less expensive. So that we're not duplicating. In past years, sometimes we were sending the same people letters every year, and they'd send them back and say, yeah, I still live here. So we're able to canvass a much smaller number of people, yet clean up our voting lists.
And
quite
the other thing is,
effectively.
the office used to outsource it to a private mail service company, and it would cost about $6,000. So by doing it in-house, we're saving a lot of money. We're also utilizing, as of last year, the town's folding machines and stuffing machines. So,
That was
I mean,
fun.
we heard from Bob that this is just a flat fee that you pay annually. There isn't an incremental cost for using it more. And so we're taking advantage of it and saved, what we sent out 22,000 pieces
No,
last year?
1,200, I think.
1,200 pieces.
Yeah. This year we'll send out fewer, probably maybe 500.
So, anyway, that's it.
So in the unlikely chance that we need an additional budget referendum, what's the ballpark figure for the cost?
Well, we thought you might ask that, so we'll have that. I know if there is an extra one, there's a possibility that we wouldn't need additional funds simply because we're budgeting for a municipal primary. And there's a high likelihood that there won't be a municipal primary. So that would be a bit of a trade-off. Have you found so a referendum, so it looks like it would be about $9,000. Looks like for some reason
Yeah.
yeah, so about $9,000.
That's for poll workers, so that's our part. Ballots and such are, come from the town clerk's budget. So we'd have to look, take a look at that too, but I think she's got that covered. We had 2 budget referendums last year in the calendar year. So that was in the last fiscal year. The primary was in this fiscal year. We didn't have a primary the year before, so we were fine and under budget at that point with those 2 referendums.
And then just,
Basically, you're saying you're okay if there's a second referendum with these numbers.
It should be.
yeah, if there's a second referendum and we don't have a municipal primary, then we're fine.
You're covered.
Yeah.
In the past, like, say, even the year before, so that 2014 was the year we had 4 budget referendums we had in that fiscal year, 2015 fiscal year, we had that special election.
Mhm.
So even with all of that, in 2014, we went, so that would have been that might have been the 2014.
That was 2015. We took
went
office in the
over-
2015
yeah,
fiscal year.
we went over budget because of those extra referendums.
But we were only
It
responsible
wasn't-
for half the year.
Wasn't our budget, but we went over by maybe $4,000 or $5,000 at the most. All the other years, even though we had some extra referendums, one-off referendums or budget referendums, we didn't go over. You want to talk about salary stuff?
And yeah, we should. We'll,
So you have in front of you, I don't know what you're looking at, maybe the same thing I am, where it shows our 3 line items. And then you can scroll across and see the percentage, either increase or decrease. So you see overall, a little less than 1% increase. And then a 6% increase in salary, 0% in the office expense, and election expense is -8%.
Yeah, so what we've been doing through the years is saving money each year, coming and proposing lower and lower budgets, but at the same time asking for salary adjustments to get the registrar's salaries and the deputy's salaries back up to something that would be hopefully attractive someday, which might not be too long from now, when Nancy and I decide that we've had enough. But you know, when we took office and agreed to run in 2014, nobody wanted these positions, and so again, we were looking for that.
So there had been prior to our first budget presentation, a gap of 6-7 years when the registrar's office didn't receive an increase at all. So our first presentation had a big increase, and that Board of Finance said not all at the same time. So we've done little increments each year, try to bring things up. Partly because it's time, and partly because we're finding too that with online voter registration, which regular online voter registration came into use in 2014, and then in 2016, DMV online reg. So every time you go to DMV, if you've been to DMV recently, they'll ask you, do you want to register to vote? Hopefully you'll tell them you're already registered, because you have to be. We don't want duplicate stuff coming in. But they send it to us electronically. And so we have to process where we might have been getting in the mail 1 or 2 a week throughout this time of year when it's not election time. We get 5 to 10 a day through DMV. So that's more work on our part to keep up with all that. Keeps the voter list more up to date. Hopefully keeps more people out of election day registration or running in at the last minute before an election. It creates more work for us to do. Not a ton, but some.
And of course, deciding to handle the annual canvass in-house gave us more work, saved a lot of money from the $6,000 outsourcing we used to do.
Okay. All right. Do you guys have any other questions? All right.
Board of Finance, any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Come up-
Good presentation.
If you come up with any other questions, let us know. You
I
know
didn't
where
know
to
there was
find
going to be
us.
applause.
Megan, are you still waiting for Ted?
Yeah, if he's not here after the next presentation, I'll just.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, why don't we go with the police department next? Because you guys are here.
This is the agenda for the discussion meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
There's
there's
more
a
there?
lot of interest in reading there.
Okay.
You'll find it interesting.
All right, thank you. So, police department, Department 360. is yours.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Michael Duff, Chairman of the Bethel Police Commission. To my right is Captain Finch, Captain Pugna, and Chief Finch.
Don't demote the
Sorry,
chief.
the pay scale stays the same. As we present this budget to you, I looked at the final number down there, 4.92. And I think it would be best for all of us if Chief Finch, who has a lot more experience than I at this, explain how we got to that 4.9. So I'm turning this over to the chief at this point in time. And Chief, you have it.
Okay. Starting out with the salaries on the top, the chief's salary, the captain, that's what we're being paid now. It doesn't include any potential raise. That doesn't come about until the first selectman decides to give us one. So the next item is 104, dispatchers and clerical.
Chief, we don't have that, just so you know, we're not seeing what you're saying.
You don't have this?
No, we're on
They're
the electronic system.
Okay, well, do you still want me to go through, as I would normally go through each item?
Yeah, what we have is the summary, like we see
Right.
the entire salary of 50, the account 5101, so we don't have to break.
Well,
out.
we do, it's under a different, hit police department expenses, and it'll all come up with that.
Yeah.
So we have it now.
But it's just the salary, right? It's not the.
Well, recognizing you may not have the detail,
No, we do now.
you do now.
We don't have the detail on salary, we have the overall salary
Yeah.
number.
Yeah, so you don't have the detail.
No.
No, because there's like 7 positions under dispatchers and clerical. Just to make the statement, there's no changes other than there's pay raises there as a result of contract changes and as a result of steps in the payroll. Other than that, there's no changes there. Negotiated salaries, that's police officers. We didn't ask for any more police officers. It's the same number of police officers that is in last year's budget, and all that's in there is a regular contractual increase. Overtime is always an issue, because it seems to add up all the time to more than what we expect. I've asked for $305,000 in the overtime this year, because we are incurring a lot of expenses in the communications center as well. And again, I think it's my duty to ask for what I think we're going to need. Obviously, we've never gotten that. It's always been cut back significantly. When the commissioner talked about the 4.9 bottom line, you cut 100,000 out of there like you normally do, or more, which is okay. We've lived with that, because there's typically excess at the end of the year. But if you cut 100,000 out of that, that budget 4.9 drops down to like 2.9 or 2.5 or something.
Chief, I'm sorry, I took a bad note. Can you give me the increase in the OT again? Is it 151,000?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
He just wants the difference between what we got last year and what
Oh,
we're asking for.
yeah, last year we asked for 80 for dispatch, 175 for police operations.
And so what's the increase in OT, in overtime from last year?
The total increase in overtime, I don't have, I'm not sure what you gave me last year.
Hold on a second. Hey, Bob, do we have, I can see the chief is working from the sheet that he's always used in the past. Do we have that embedded in here anyplace?
No, those are totals. The salary includes the overtime. So the overtime went up $82,000, so 37%.
82,000.
82,000.
Or 37%?
The dispatch went from 80 to 90, and the police went from 175 to 215.
So what's the total, Bob, of the overtime increase?
From 223 to 305.
So it's 30%?
37.
Well, if,
60, so 73, 72, 73,000.
Hmm?
A total of about 73,000?
82,000 increase.
82.
okay, if you could, as the chief goes through this, if you could just help everybody understand what they're looking at, because our numbers are completely different than what his is, because he's going through detail
Well,
and
he's
his
got-
roll up.
What you have in here is a summary of that account, salaries. That includes all of the different salary accounts, which is
Yeah, right.
also overtime is included in
There
that.
was an
Well,
increase.
overtime
There was
went
a
to
significant
4.5.
increase. There was
Overtime
noticeable
is the
increase in the
fifth one
overtime,
down.
because frankly, last year, I didn't ask for everything I thought I needed. I thought I could get away with less, knowing well that I wasn't going to get it and it was gonna get cut anyway. So this year, based on the last year, which we've incurred a lot of overtime, I think we may be exposed to that amount, and that's why I asked for it.
Well, and the only reason why I was asking about overtime is, if I'm understanding this correctly, all the other items are contractual obligations, so there's no discretion there. Overtime, in theory, has some discretion, so I'm just trying to isolate, and again, we have the total increase, just trying to isolate the increase in overtime, which might be kind of
Salary.
part of the same.
Don't forget, when they changed their dispatch policy to
Well, no, but there's no
dispatchers all the
detail.
time, it almost created,
There's no
almost
overtime.
80 to 100 shifts a
On the
year of
street.
guareed overtime.
Yeah, mine has
So
over.
you went from allowing one
No.
dispatcher on
The
a
fifth
shift,
item down.
we talked about this,
Salary,
and when they
office,
increased the minimum to 2,
equipment, maintenance,
anytime
K9
someone
unit.
takes a vacation day, a
That's
sick
not-
day,
that's
not what
training
mine
day,
Hmm?
it's built into it's built in, you have almost probably, I don't know if it's 80 shifts, they probably have a better handle on that than me, but, you're guaranteed at least, that many, if they have a senior, they get 20 vacation days, that's 20 days of overtime guaranteed.
Yeah, keep
So it's
them,
not discretionary.
It's not discretionary in terms of that, other overtime you
there's
would call
there's a lot of
discretionary.
overtime that's really not discretionary, as we view it.
Sure.
You could at any time say you don't have any overtime, and my guys would stop working, and you'd have all kinds of complaints, legal and otherwise. They just can't go home or walk away from some of these things when they happen. And the dispatchers, we dispatch for fire, EMS, and police. Fire and EMS are a significant burden. They take a lot more effort to do that than it does just to dispatch for cops. You can't have just one person in a dispatch center
No.
trying to handle that,
We had,
much less,
did we add a dispatcher last year?
Yes.
Yeah,
2
we
years
did.
ago.
Two,
2
okay.
years.
No, one.
We just went over that.
We added one.
we added one.
Okay.
But 2 years ago, we had.
But every time one of those takes a vacation day or a sick day, we have to hire somebody to replace them. Most of the time, it's another dispatcher at 250, 200 or 300 a day. Sometimes the dispatchers don't want it. You can only force them to work so much before you start to get problems. So when they don't want it, we reach out to police officers. So instead of 300, it's 400 now. And the police end up working in there maybe a quarter of the time. So it adds up quick. You take 9 dispatchers times 20 or 30 days off each per year. That's what generates the overtime.
And this is just a fact of managing the department. There's no real alternative to this.
We haven't found any yet. Anybody's got some thoughts?
We use light duty for dispatch.
Hmm?
We use light duty for dispatch, so police officers are put on the desk. If they're on light duty, they cover the desk. And we have, actually, our department has all desk officers, so.
How do they answer 911?
Our guys.
Yeah.
Say 911.
No, but I mean, by state
You mean
statute,
the EMD guys?
you have to be
You gotta
certified by
remember,
the state of Connecticut to answer
We're
911.
all certified desk officers, even me as a captain.
You're certified EMD?
I'm a certified desk officer.
Are
So
you certified emergency medical?
some of the guys
dispatcher?
are. You gotta let me answer
You
the
no,
question.
you-
Steve, I understand.
You
can
have to, by the
transfer
state
fire
of
department.
Connecticut state statute.
Okay.
You
But
have to
but
be
also have-
certified to answer
But you also have a
911.
fire department working with you, and they have some dispatch capabilities as well, right?
There's paramedics who we can transfer now.
Yeah, so it's not apples to apples when we talk. When we
But you
talk
have an EMD
Richfield.
dispatcher in there all the time. If you have 2, you always have one that's EMD, correct?
They're both EMD. They have to be
Listen me.
EMD
You're
to
saying
answer
you couldn't put a
911.
police officer on the desk. What I'm saying is if you have an EMD dispatcher, you still have someone to answer normal calls if you needed to fill it with a light duty stuff.
Yeah.
You're saying I'm not comparing apples to apples. I'm just telling you that there is an alternative if you want. You said if there is, let you know.
You know, but that's an alternative that we don't find acceptable. When you take a cop off the street, it not only costs you more, but it reduces your manpower on the street. And that's of significant concern to us. It's just like giving guys more time off. It's just like this comp time. Everybody thinks comp time is free. Well, yes, it doesn't cost you overtime, but it costs men on the street. Instead of going out with 4 or 5 officers, you're constantly going out with 3. So I'm all for putting a cop on the desk. I think that's a great idea, but it costs. And we haven't been able to do that. We haven't been able to do that because of labor issues. When we reconsolidated the fire department with the police department, that went to the labor board, there was labor issues. We can't put a cop on the desk except when a dispatcher takes a day off and no other dispatcher wants to work it. Then we're allowed to put a cop on the desk. And that's by the labor law, labor decision.
And you can't have part-time people, certified part-time
How would
people do
you,
that?
how would you train, well, first of all, they're not very well trained.
Okay.
No, well, they're not.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to get someone that just retired, who really knows the software in the town. And other than that, if he was a part-time dispatcher, what schedule would I tell him he has? When are you working? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, when he decides he's gonna take a day off, that's when you're working. I don't know what to tell you. Are you available next Saturday or tomorrow night? Midnights, days, 4 to 12.
I mean, those are all kind of operational questions, right, which you all are the experts at. I think our.
Well, everybody's got another schedule that I think will work. I'd love to see it. We've thought about it a lot, and
And I think from our perspective, Chief, it's an increase of whatever it is here in the numbers, and most of it's contractual, and some of it's the overtime.
And we're, you know, sympathetic.
And it's-
Overtime is, as you know, is not a generally loved thought out in the community, and so that's why we're just asking this, not to.
No, I don't-
Not to.
I'm just trying to answer it
Is there a-
and make you
is
aware
there
of some of
a-
the fine points that we have to
Sure.
consider, and
Is there a point of overtime or a level of overtime that you consider that warrants an additional dispatcher? I
It
know
wouldn't-
we
it wouldn't
got
help.
1-2 years ago, but is there some
Wouldn't help.
formulaic thing that if we get to this level of overtime, then instead of increasing by so much, we actually increase the workforce?
not that we know of, not that we see right now. You know, I've had the labor attorneys tell me too, it's much more reasonable and efficient to hire overtime. And, you know, until you go over the top where you start burning people out because it's too much, it's much more efficient and dollar-wise than hiring another employee.
Okay, so just,
So that-
I'm on, by the way, thanks to Brad, I'm on the right page now. I had a previous version of a budget that was like a test budget. So the salary line has a 4% increase because of the overtime increase that you're looking for.
Well, the overtime significant part, that's probably 2% of it.
Okay.
And what was the contracted salary increase percentage?
I'm sorry.
The negotiation with the police and the contract increase, what was that percentage rate?
That's
Yeah.
actually not in there yet. 'Cause they're
Well,
in
steps.
negotiations now.
Steps are in there, steps wouldn't be in there. Annual
Yeah.
pay raises
So what was
are
the
still subject to
percentage?
be,
What was the percentage of annual?
those are different, they aren't in
Aileen,
here because.
That's in wage adjustments, and we can't talk about that, because we'd be letting the union know how much we're building into our budget as far as an
I
increase.
think she's trying to figure out
Yeah.
what it means, a step increase.
Yeah.
If an officer's
Oh, a
5 years
step is
on
in
the
there.
job, every year they get a step increase, that's aside from a contractual raise. So a first-year officer may get paid 40,000, where a 5-year veteran is at 80,000. So each year they get a step until they hit the top step.
Okay,
So as the department ages, that can go up until they're all on top step.
So is this salary increase number not what we're actually gonna see for this year?
They have it in wage contingency, so it's already covered on a different line.
There's one contract in negotiations now for the police. And so they don't know what the salary is going to be. If there's to be a salary increase, they don't know what it is yet. They haven't got to that. But we do have a contract, and we do know what the dispatchers' salaries are. So the dispatchers reflect the salary increase and the step where it's relevant.
So the dispatcher's percentage increases in here,
Yes,
and what percentage was that?
I don't know.
Percentage of-
I couldn't hear the question.
I believe it was 2.25 or 2.5, but I'm not positive.
Okay, and
What,
the
last
police
year's
officers
increase?
are still
Last year's
negotiating,
dispatch
so that's why we
increase.
don't
Oh,
know that
dispatch
number.
was
So
2.
this number is eventually gonna be
2.5.
larger than this when the police finalize their negotiations. Is that what we're saying? If they get an increase?
Assuming they get a raise, yes,
Yeah, okay.
it'd be larger than that. Okay.
Just for a note for the record, we've had a little bit of a breakdown here because the chief is using the same format that he's used for years, and we're using a different format, and we're seeing different numbers because ours roll up into subtotals. So what I just asked Bob to do is to take the chief's detail that he has, which is, it's basically just an interactive Excel sheet, and upload it to this so you can open it as a document. So, because like when you get to capital equipment, you're gonna see there's a 31% increase in there, and there's a lot of rich detail as to why that is that you can't see. So we'll upload that tomorrow so that you can still download this. Then what I'd ask you to do is, after you see that, obviously you're gonna ask a lot of questions, as many questions as you can tonight, but once you see that detail, if you have further questions, email them up to Dion, and we will obtain the answers and spread it back. We could even have somebody come back at a future meeting in the next couple days and answer questions if you had further.
Man,
So, just so you know.
Brad went upstairs to scan it, and he's gonna put it in right now.
Okay.
As soon as he comes down.
Okay.
Do we need to do that for the other similar departments as well, so that like when we look at the fire
It-
department and some others, that we have the same
It
background?
I mean,
depends.
not all of them have done it the way the chief did it,
Yeah.
so that data is not available.
This is particularly rich with detail, and there's some reasons why, you see some of the changes that you do, so we'll get you that detail.
And I think the reason is you're gonna see the two categories, the salary and the capital is gonna be that
Yeah.
detail needed more than anything.
I do want to commend you, the cover sheet, the narrative, did a great job of spelling out and that, what the budget drivers are. So there is some detail in that'll help board members understand.
Okay, are we
So-
past overtime? Special police, we still have a couple of special police officers that assist us. There's no increase there. Longevity is contractual. There's a reduction there, actually. But that assuredly, well, there's a reduction there. Might go up next year, but. Holiday time, that's contractual, and there's a small increase of 2.7. That probably ties into the last pay raise or something that they got, I don't know. Educational incentive, there's an increase there because we just hired a couple other people and another couple of people get this educational incentive, they get paid if they have a bachelor's degree or such, and but they don't get it as soon as they come on. They don't get it they're not eligible till the July after their probation, which is usually a year and a half. So for instance, what I list here does not count the last couple people that have degrees. There's still a couple more out there. So next year, we'll be adding on to that again. So that's partly why you see the increase there. Training overtime, this is overtime that's dedicated for training. There's a very small increase there of just $1,000. Again, that's somewhat tied into whatever percentage in pay that they'll normally get and when the contract is settled. Office expenses, there's a small increase. Equipment and supplies, a small increase. I'm talking about $100 or $1,000 in one, $100 in another. Communications, $6,500, no increase. K-9 unit, no increase. Bicycle, no increase. Armory operations, that's firearms and other equipment. Supporting that, there's no increase. Training and education, small increase of $150. Professional services, $306, no increase. Clothing allowance, $308, a small increase of $450. A lot of that is contractual, not all of it, but most, 90-something% of it, I think. And then we get to contracted services, $313. Here there was some changes, good and other, in having to do with the new building. The first three on the top that you see is dispatch voice recordings. We saved some money there because instead of having 3 different companies doing these things, now we have one. And the first year or 2, all these things are covered under warranties. So we saved some money for the first year or 2 in that area.
If I could interrupt just for a second, what do they need to, I can see that it's up now.
So just attached to an attachment is the detail, just the salary.
Do they need to refresh the page?
I'm not sure. You might just have to click back to the proposal.
Yeah. You should be able to see exactly what the chief is seeing now. It was uploaded. Thank you,
The
Brad.
salary.
Just down on 3139.
Because the other part's there.
Yeah.
I scanned it in case they need to update it.
Ready?
Yes.
Yep.
As you go down the list, the areas that we did see some increases worth noting was the Detective DB Cellubrite maintenance. That's Detective Bureau, and the Cellubrite is a software program that examines phones. They charge us maintenance every year for that program and for training, and that's what it costs. There was an increase of $500 there. Further down, we don't see anything significant until we get to, well, translation went from $300 to $400. That's a service that we can call up at any time and they'll translate almost any language that we have a need to translate. And those are real people that we get, those are usually real people we get on the phone. One of our big expenses, CIS and CAD's records software did not go up. The next one, Comcast Internet Service, went up. They've been poised for a lot of years to raise us, and they didn't. But now that we went to the new building, they raised us from $3,500 to $5,000, $5,050. Software server licensing and such went up about $2,000. Mobile data terminals went up a little bit from 9.3 to 10.8. And the evidence incinerator, we have to pay so much to have evidence and other things incinerated. That went up. So there's an increase in that account of about $4,300. Do you have any questions on that account? And although you can't call it contractual, it's required operational expenses that most of it we'd be hard pressed to live without. Or it would surely set us back if we couldn't do some of those things. Capital. He asked for 4 vehicles. As the first selectman pointed out, there was a big increase in this account, and that's why, because last year we asked for 4, you gave us 3. So you cut out 30,000, so we're asking for 4 back. So that's why you see the big increase. There's other items, but.
Well, I think the vehicle, Ford's monkeying with the models again, right?
What's that?
Ford
Yeah.
Motor Company is
Yeah.
changing the models, and that's forced up the price.
Yeah,
Okay.
constant. You know, I'm sure you know now that they're talking about not making any sedans anymore. Ford has made it known they're not making sedans. A lot of cars manufacturers are moving away from standard sedans and making SUV type cars. Ford now is all they're making. So as they start to make those, we encounter changes that force us to change some of our equipment.
So Brad, we don't have any of that detail, correct?
So now I just uploaded the detail. I didn't know the chief was gonna go through every line item. So I did upload the detail that has.
Are you staying with the same model?
But that's helpful.
So
to have the
so
detail.
that, you don't have to, like the light bar and all that. You can
Here's
transfer-
the deal,
we're hoping that we got a few 2019 Explorer versions reserved.
Okay.
They're short run of 2019, because they're moving to this 2020 version, in which case it goes up about $3,000 a car, and I'm getting told the equipment will not transfer over. The light bars probably would, but the cage inside, the console, they haven't made official notice of that yet as of last week. But their early indications are it's gonna be a change. It's a little bit bigger, different dimensions. So,
They're finding the smaller model that we buy is a little small, and the bigger one seems a little too big, so they're probably gonna make something in between eventually. Constantly changing.
the good news is they're pushing a hybrid version of it. I wouldn't want to have it the first year, make sure it works first.
Yeah, of course.
But eventually, it'll cost a little bit more money, but it's supposed to be a significant savings in fuel. Supposed to be. We'll see how it pans out.
Under a police model. not a-
Yes.
There's also changeover. Do you have the detail yet, or don't you? You do.
Not
The number two, the vehicle changeover costs, I list them separately this year, because there always seems to be confusion about if I cut out a car, how does that affect the changeover cost? So I listed them separately for 4 cars. And again, not every car would cost that, but we don't know until it happens. Some cars are a little cheaper, some are a little bit more expensive. And that's every 3 or 4 years as we change a car, that's the expense we incur when we take it up to the dealers, and they've got to pull out all the old equipment, put in all the new equipment, or take all the equipment out of one car and put it in another car. Number 3, vehicle computers. I have 3 at $3,200. That's about the same as it was last year. We're trying to make sure we keep ahead of that. Just like defibrillators, we don't want to wait till the computer breaks down to buy another one. By the time they get 5, 6 years old, they need to be changed out. Cameras, we're looking for 1 more camera for 1 more car. Light bar, we still anticipate we need 1 more light bar. Computerization for hardware replacement and upgrades in the cars. That's a little bit different than what the rest of the building entails. 1 radar unit. Taser, the Taser cost us $7,000 this year. The past couple of years, we had donation money and we were buying some of our Tasers, most of our Tasers through that. So we were able to get Tasers for everybody in the department. Now it's a matter of maintaining them and training. You need to, by law, they need to, there's an interesting court decision I gave you in that package on Tasers. By law now, they expect you to do so much training every year to make sure you're proficient, to make sure the Tasers work. And again, it's like, it's an electronic item. You don't want to wait until it fails to find out you need a replacement. So this package here gives us replacement ability and a lot of cartridges for training. What do the cartridges cost each?
I'm not sure offhand. They're,
But we have to use like 3 for every officer every year, or every?
yeah, every year we have to
Yeah,
get
it's-
certified.
It adds up quick. But again, that's a worthwhile tool, as you can well imagine. It gives the officer something else to do than hit a guy with a blackjack, or we don't use blackjacks. Hartford still uses nightsticks.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I can remember getting a lecture a long time ago from our chief, when we went to these PR-24s, you don't have to take, no matter how many times you tell the cop not to hit him in the head, you get into a fight, people start swinging and somebody gets hit in the head. So that's why they went away from a lot of these things like blackjacks and stuff. It was too much. And that's the benefit of the Taser. It saves a lot of that. Saves a lot of that. I gave Selectmen a very controversial decision that was favorable to the police and favorable to the use of a Taser. So they're worth the money. And the defibrillators, again, we replace a couple defibrillators every year. We have about a dozen of them. Every officer has one in the car. Don't want to wait until they fail, much less in real life being used, to replace them. I don't want a taser out there or a defibrillator that's 6, 7, 8 years old. So that's capital equipment.
Okay, so you guys should be able to see the detail now? Came up, okay.
What happens with the trade-in money?
I'm sorry.
What do you do with the trade-in money when you trade the cars in?
We rely on that for part of the changeover costs. Sometimes these changeover costs just don't cover everything. Because it's not always taking equipment out of one car and putting it in another. There's something wrong with this equipment, it doesn't fit, or something wrong with this equipment, we gotta do this, and the labor expenses start to add up for the changeover.
You come to a point of saying, it's just cheaper to buy a new one rather than labor exchanging? In other words, buy something new rather than waiting and looking at your labor costs to exchange it from one vehicle to another. Is it still cheaper that way?
It depends on what it is. Some of the light bars are most of the light bars are relatively new, so
Yeah.
as long as we could change them, there's not much labor involved in that. We're trying to exchange some of the controllers year by year. Say we're getting like 2 marked cars, maybe we have enough money to get 1 new controller that goes inside, because theirs are starting to get up there in age, like 10 years old, and they start to go. The ones that we do replace, we send them back to Wayland and they get refurbished inside, and they take it apart and clean it out and check to see if there's any new wiring that needs to be redone. So it depends on what equipment and what's kind of left, and, you know, if the size stays the same, we could reuse some of the cages. And
Then I would assume that, like that back seat is an issue depending on the model then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I haven't got the official word, but last time I talked to the Ford dealer, they said the dimensions are gonna be different enough, you're not gonna be able to reuse cages in the 2020s. So, pretty sure I have a couple 2019s reserved though. Not a guarantee, but pretty sure I do.
How many cars do we have now total? I know you use for.
Patrol
police.
cars, you're talking unmarked and patrol?
Yeah.
I think it's 20 or 22.
And you got a couple old ones there that you use for.
For extra, there's 2 we use just for extra duty.
Right.
Yeah, now that you bring that up,
I know.
it's a good time to remind you
There's $100,000 you earned.
that we collected $89,000 just in,
Thank you.
just in car fees and rental of car fees last year. There's one year there we got $120,000. So we've often brought that to your attention, hoping that will
Pay for the
make
car.
you feel better about giving us a 4th car. Sometimes it works,
We always feel great about that.
sometimes it doesn't.
So how many years do you keep a car?
4 to 5.
4 to 5 years you
Yeah.
keep a car?
And what determines that number of years? Is it mileage? Is it technology?
Time.
Like,
It's-
how do you know when it's time to retire a car?
Time, mileage, sometimes,
Hours.
some cars are better than others, some are lemons, some aren't.
Some cars get a reputation quick down at the garage as far as their repair rate and what's happening with them.
A lot of it is hours on the engines, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's twice the hours on the engine, so it's, the miles is misleading sometimes.
So I guess my question would be, if you asked for 4 last year and got 3, you're asking for 4 this year, are you gonna ask for 3 or 4 next year as well? Is that a
Usually,
yearly thing?
usually 4 is the perfect number to keep us kind of going in a perfect cycle. We've been fortunate enough the last couple of years, we've been down like significant amount of guys, so we don't have as many guys putting mileage on the cars. So we survived last year, pretty decent shape.
When was the last time we got 4?
The
Two
prior
years
2 or
ago.
3 years before that. So last year we got cut back to 3. Just to give you an idea, just off the top of my head, 2 of the cars we'll be replacing would be a 2009 and 2012. The other 2, I think, are 2014s, the ones we would be replacing.
If I remember, you typically, in a first-line patrol car, put about 100,000 miles in 1 year, correct? Or is that over 2 years?
No, patrol cars be 20 to 30, 25 is a safe number depending on.
In a year?
Yeah.
Okay, so
25 to 30.
so it's 100,000 over the life of that vehicle?
Correct. When
Okay.
we're trading
That's
in,
what-
they're between 80 and 120 depending on a given time and.
And again,
life
there's
cycle.
twice as many hours on the engine as there are miles. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
the miles
They
don't.
don't get shown.
I mean, like your car, you look at
Sorry.
miles, that
But
reflects
it's
the
not
age of
something
your
they
car
check.
for you.
No, no.
For
It's always
us,
on.
it's twice as many, it's twice that on engine hours.
And the other big part too, with these newer SUVs are nice, but they're a lot more expensive to get fixed when they start getting old.
Mhm.
Because they're all-wheel drive, more things to go wrong with them.
Mhm.
It's not part of our budget, but that's why you want to
Mhm.
cycle them out when they hit 80, 90, 100,000 miles.
Mhm. Before they get expensive.
And they're not on the road anymore either, half
Yeah.
the time.
Okay.
I just have one more question. It looks like there are 3 vehicle computers. If there is a 4th car, do you need a 4th vehicle computer?
No, unmarked, and one of those cars would be an unmarked, and we cycle the computers out. So we have about 16 computers, including some of the medic car, the animal control officer has one. So usually about 3 to 4 years, the computers start going and getting slow, and because they're tough books that sit out there and they get beat up.
Thanks.
And how many cars do we have on the road at any given time? What's the typical number?
Patrol cars?
I guess, that's what I'm asking.
A typical shift is a sergeant and 4 or 5 patrolmen, so you're talking 5 or 6, 7 cars. That's like, when we're full staff out there,
Yeah.
it goes down as low as 3.
So we might have another 5 or 6 sitting in the lot kind of thing? Is
Some,
that
in the
right?
overnight shift, you'll see cars sitting there. In the day shift, you go there, there's usually not one, maybe, between the extra duty jobs and the SROs and the guys on patrol.
Yeah.
So they're pretty well utilized, and even though there's 22.
Oh, yeah,
Pretty
yeah,
well utilized.
yeah. Yeah, and obviously, if you're on midnight shift at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's a lot of cars sitting there, but at, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, there's probably none sitting
We
there.
provide 2 SROs, and it's important that they have cars there also. The school recognizes that, because that shows the presence of a cop on the premise or in the building by having a car there.
Yes, we're happy to have that.
Then the extra work, we keep 2 or 3 cars for extra work and everything. I can't believe how many people are renting to hire those cars today. It's really surprising, I
Who's
think.
hiring them? Who rents them?
All the
Um,
utility companies and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Eversource,
private.
yeah.
Like if a contractor is working on a road, within certain parameters, they're required by ordinance to hire police officers to direct traffic and keep the work site safe. So those are special duties that are paid by the contractor, not by tax dollars.
You have more than one contractor run over by people, and I'm sure that spreads through the
Oh.
contractors so they're worried about it. They're worried about getting hit by people that aren't paying
Well, there was-
attention,
yeah,
and
there was
sometimes
a-
flagmen that just aren't doing a real good job.
There was a worker killed in Brookfield about 6 months ago
Yeah.
on a job site.
The resource officers, are they in your budget?
Mhm. Yeah. All right. You guys have any other questions?
Good here. How's the van?
Good, good.
Yeah, have you ever had to use it for it?
Yeah, we've used it, major accident scenes. Yesterday, the ESU train, we use it. The range, and we have to go up to the Southbury range now, so when we go out in different times of the year, we use it as like kind of a training classroom and able
What did you
to
do with the old one?
trade it in.
Traded it in?
Yeah. As the mice were running out of the back of it, it was driving out the driveway. It was a 2002, and it started, the maintenance guys actually were pretty much close to telling us not to drive it anymore because the whole underneath started rusting out. It was
Yeah.
unsafe. So,
All right. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If it's, Megan, you're still waiting for Ted, right?
that's the 2020 one. If you're interested in looking at.
Well, the
hybrid
charter
version
says
stuff,
the
yeah.
chair is supposed to be there, so.
Does it help if I have
statement?
What-
Does it
sorry?
notify the statement from our chairman?
You
Ted's
can-
filling in.
I got another one.
No.
No, I was-
He's not the chairman.
I know you did, that's one.
Oh, who's the chair?
DM Murphy?
Tia? Oh, I'm sorry, okay, I'm sorry.
He's,
I just looked at it,
waiting.
it was bigger. That's what,
I'm sorry?
it's a little different.
If you look here, it shows you the savings and the.
Oh,
So
okay.
Ted was supposed to be filling in for her, but she
Okay,
did
all
write
right.
a statement.
That's no problem. If it's okay with you, I'm gonna have Chris go first, because the son is here, and then tomorrow's a school day. I'm sorry.
I'm used to the kid, right?
The fine young member of
I
the
went there
family is here.
yesterday.
Watching.
Well, he was curious as to what I'm gonna do tonight, so it's like, you can
There's
come
only
on
a
and see.
couple ways. I'm talking about the
All right.
police jacket and the garage out in the back again.
Okay,
Well, everything is out. Other than
all right, if I can,
So way out.
if I can call the board's attention to Department 180, Building Inspection, and introduce Mr. Baldwin.
All right, let's see how we get on.
Good evening. So basically, if you go through the budget, I'm not asking for any increases in any of the line items except when it comes to the salary line. If you go to that.
Just give us a second, Chris, we gotta catch up.
No problem.
Good to see you.
And some of the reasons for the increase is, we've got 2 large school projects that are coming up that are gonna require an increase in inspections and so forth. We've had certain statutory requirements where they've increased some of the requirements for us regarding certain inspections, such as oil tank removals. That's an added responsibility that now requires permitting. The energy codes are constantly increasing, requiring us to further increase what we're looking at and inspecting. And then the other thing that I want to add that isn't on here but will be coming up is I'm trying to improve the department with online permitting, trying to go paperless and so forth. And that's going to require a lot of my time managing some of the personnel within that department too. So based on those reasons, it's going to require that I have some assistance when it comes to inspections. I have a part-time inspector that I had this past year, and I'd like to increase his time in handling a lot of the residential inspections so I could spend more time with the schools and the commercial inspections, and also more time within the department regarding online permitting and trying to get paperless and more into the 21st century with a lot of what we're doing. It'll increase transparency within the department. It'll help people to see where their permits are, speed up the process and make us more efficient. And the other thing too I want to point out is over the past couple of years that I've been here, I've been looking at what are, how much money is going out of the department, how much money is coming into the department. And over the past couple of years, last year was about $42,000 net positive income into the department, and I'm estimating another 40 to 42,000 net positive coming into the department too. So I'm really just asking to take some of that money that's going into the general fund and put it back into the department to help improve it. You say 42 last year, and you're anticipating 40?
40 to 42, yeah. And this is net positive income.
In trying to do this online, do you have the equipment for it, or you're gonna have to buy some capital equipment to do online?
Well, we'll have to purchase a computer, and we could put a kiosk in the department there in that waiting area so that people could, maybe while the administrative assistant is handling someone, give them the option that here's the computer, you can go online, you can start the process there. There would be that, and then there will be some costs involved with that, but those might be absorbed more through other departments and so forth.
So Chris, that's tied in to like the home improvement registration, like in Ridgefield, when you pull your permit, it automatically knows you're a home improvement contractor. It knows
Yes.
you're- So it actually, like when people, like when I pull a permit, it proves that I have all my licenses and everything. The computer The only thing that's different about it is the scanning. Like for somebody who doesn't have a scanner, I still have to go to the builder department, like when you're submitting plans and stuff, and they'll scan them for it. But it's actually a pretty cool system, because you see exactly where it is.
Yeah.
Like, all I have to do, I can pull it up on my phone right now and see where my permit is, what department's looking at it, whether they've passed it. It's really, it's pretty amazing.
What's the estimated cost for something like that? I'm sure you must have looked at that.
What we're looking at is about $40,000, because there's initial setup cost, and then there's a yearly maintenance
Software
cost.
and all
Yeah,
that, right.
yeah.
This is something that I have been trying to get done for
Many
5,
years.
6 years,
Yeah,
7
I know.
years.
We've been always talking, even when
Yeah.
Gary was here.
Even when Gary was here, and I have to do a mea culpa. I have tried to get it done on the cheap, and nothing has worked. I mean, there's a system out there that other towns use, it works. We're behind the curve on this. This will make us more efficient. So this is included in our DP proposal for this year, to move forward.
Does
with
that
this.
include the training behind that also?
Yeah.
From the vendor?
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
And
so
I'll
you
ha-
can
and-
get all of your.
And the way it's geared is I'll have to spend some time being trained by them, and then I'll have to work with others to train them to pass that knowledge on to
I
them.
know we'll
and
cross
get-
with other departments here too.
Yeah, yeah, what I want to do is I want to start with the mechanical permits, which is just within our own department.
Right.
Start there, and then slowly branch out to other departments in the more complicated permits. But I want to start, and the mechanical permits are the bulk of what we have coming through the
Right.
department. So in a pretty efficient way, just within our department, we can streamline 70% of what comes through the department.
Yeah.
That, one of the things we already started to do is we have to go paperless. Because when we're filing, we don't want to file a paper copy and a digital copy at the same time.
Exactly.
So we've invested in what's called DocuSign. And that has a lot of provisions for us to, like, when I get a document, now I can sign it, and it's my legal signature, and it's traceable and so forth, so.
And you have a backup like a call or something like that, I would assume.
Yeah, and what we'll do is we'll take that document, we'll back it up, and we'll put it into our digital.
I can concur with Matt. I know when Gary was here, I was always asking about it, trying to move it forward, because, you know, this is the 21st century.
Yeah.
What we're working with.
And we've already started that process. And I've been talking with Matt about getting it going pretty soon. It's not included in what I've got here. It'll be probably in one of the other budgets.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's gonna require a lot of my time
Yeah.
to get this up and running, and that's why if I can have more hours for one of the other
Part-timers.
inspectors, I can spend more time getting this up.
Well, I want to point out to the two boards that we have the same amount of manpower in this department as we did during the recession. And all I have to do is look at the building activity in town to know that, not even including the weekend homeowners who build garages and put up decks and need assistance from the department, the workload has grown tremendously. Bethel is one of the few towns in Connecticut that's growing. That's the good news. The bad news is that he has to have some part-time hours to bring in a little bit of help during the high season, during the summer season, when there's a huge amount of permit requests going through. There was a point that, they were issuing permits, but the staff was months behind in putting them in the computer.
Yeah,
We
getting
were
them all
flirting
in.
with violating
So
some
forth.
state statutes on that. So the salary line that you see here reflects not a new hire, but some part-time hours to. relieve the
Additional
burden.
hours to my part-time inspector. And also too, sometimes we get assistance from, like Greg has come in
Mhm.
and he's helped out. He's a college student. And when he's between classes and so forth, he's come in to assist with processing and filing and so forth.
So how many people are in the department?
There's myself, Joe Fallow, Jolene, the administrative assistant.
That's
So there's
it.
like
That's
two
it.
inspectors and one
Yep,
assistant.
and then I have Tom, who's a part-time inspector, and he's gone from December till April, and then he comes back.
And that's
he's-
who the part-time.
Yeah, he's part-time, so 3 full-time and 1 part-time.
Yeah.
Well, but two full-time inspectors, 1 part-time inspector, and 1 administrator.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I just
You'd be-
want,
You'd be able to pay those permits online too, right now, if you go to that system?
yes.
You could actually pay with a credit card or a
Yeah.
debit card. It makes it easier.
Yeah, because what happens now is they fill out that application, all that information is then re-entered into the computer. When the applicant applies for it, that information is not being re-entered by the administrative assistant, it's already in the software and already there. That's pretty much it.
Any more questions on the, from the Board of Finance?
They do a great job.
Okay.
For you guys?
Okay. You guys have any other questions?
All right, thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for coming. Okay, library minutes. Megan, please. Thank you for your patience, I appreciate it.
It was worth it.
All right, so Department 435, library.
Yes, just give me one moment to get that opened up.
Oh, okay.
Same footprint.
Oh, you have to cover up? Do you guys want to take a 2-minute recess or something?
Sure.
Okay.
That would be.
Yeah, so you, yeah,
perfect.
take your time.
Okay.
That'll
That's
work.
good for us, okay. So let me show you. So this is what they work on. So.
What's that?
So it's very simple. This is what they say. I have a printed copy here. And then, so I put in the differences that I see. So.
Is there a way for us to get the more detail
Sure.
on salary and that kind of thing on the bigger departments that are coming down the
Sure.
pike? Because when we're just looking at the overall
Sure.
number for salary or capital or anything else, we don't know what the detail is.
Sure.
Just ask Brad.
Yeah, just send an email and say any of the departments you want more detail on, and any area you want the detail, they'll just upload it.
Yeah.
No, in fact, they'll upload it to everybody.
For everybody. Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Because the
Yeah, that- I mean,
binders,
that's-
while they were a
yeah.
pain to carry around, had
Yeah.
so much more in them.
Yeah.
right?
Yes, we're,
And the screen is small, so you
It
gotta
is
keep
small,
moving
I
this.
know.
Yeah.
You gotta
Just
slide
gotta
this way
arrow
that way.
over.
Yeah.
some of those department heads are a little better than others, so learning the system and learning how to, because in any of those lines, like salaries, the department head should go in and add as many sublines as they want. And it rolls up to the.
Oh, and should we look at the sublines? Because there's, I don't have any
No,
sublines.
I'll have Bob just upload the detail from the page.
Yeah, so we at least have a spreadsheet.
Seems like it's easy for them to do,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's easier now, but yeah.
Yeah.
So that's pretty
For
detailed.
like tomorrow night and Thursday night, they could just put the detail at the bottom of each department, right? And then for next year, maybe they could do the sublines so that
It'll all be built out next year.
Yeah, okay.
This is a work in progress.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's good.
Yeah, but we can do that.
Do you want to ask Brad or do you want me to ask Brad?
We'll let Brad know which ones you want first.
I just think you should put all of them up.
Well, I.
Well, I don't know if he's gonna have time to do it overnight though, so.
Well, I don't think we have, I mean, for tomorrow
just
night
what's
and
coming
for
up.
Thursday night, we have maybe, what, 10 more departments? 5 departments each night or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, I have to look at
I have
that.
to look, so whatever it is, I mean, I think,
It's, okay.
yeah, it should, I mean, it didn't take 2 seconds.
Well,
Welcome to the library.
the best way to do it would be to go to that expense line and see the summaries. And then you add drop downs to that.
Oh, I don't want him
that's
to have to do that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. But if you can just attach the Excel files like he did
Okay.
for the police department, that would be.
Some of the simpler departments don't have Excel files because there's like 1 or 2 people.
That's probably okay.
But the bigger departments will.
Yeah, yeah. But if the smaller departments have big requests for big increases,
Yeah.
then it would be good to see like what they're actually asking for.
Sure.
Because while we're talking about it right now, when we walk away and we're really thinking and deliberating about
Yeah.
it, we're all gonna be like, now what was in that increase, right?
Sure. Yep.
Lynn's files show.
Yeah, but if you think of anything else, just email all of
And
us.
it's been.
We'll get it in.
And unless they fix an issue in our bylaws where
Spill
we
your
have.
coffee. Almost.
So it could be the case.
I mean,
that some
hot
people
chocolate.
said, so
We can always
it's
change the
just
warrant.
never put into.
Don't let her scare you.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's a possibility, they're right, but it means all of our current records are inaccurate. Just something else to work on.
No, I mean, that's not a big deal. That's not, it's fine. I just was like, so bad. You're ahead of yourself. I just didn't want to.
No. What a day. Terry.
Because she did tell me that when she was to be.
Yes.
Last week.
Yep.
If it hadn't been.
I think my team is
And I did that again last night. I had already said.
You're gonna get all my paperwork in a row.
Here, I am just that is his day.
Well, I hope I didn't Tia forwarded me her email exchange, and in my mind, everything was there that was needed.
And you're dedicated.
Yeah.
But they can't just figure out that everything else is just the same. She didn't say that. Last year, because you
Oh,
already
no,
had
there's
some
a whole
blood cancer. So his body is swelled basically.
It's an overview of the overview, because we don't know necessarily what
Gathers all this.
report can't release this. And this is what comes up first, the narrative, which is what I printed out. But most of them. So they make those major expenses.
Replace tiny pieces.
They're not gonna let them run until they find out what else is causing this swelling. I just thought you'd want to.
I do, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Cautious is better for them.
Okay.
Can you speak?
A little bit. I mean, 10%
Shameful of us.
Hey, Bob, if you guys are ready to go ahead and get started, I'll just rejoin you in a second.
Okay, sure.
I've seen it.
Okay, let us
Used to it. We're the library.
begin with the discussion of Department 435, the library.
Good evening, Selectmen, committee members of the Finance Board. My name is Megan Dean. I'm the library director for anyone who doesn't know me. We have a newly appointed executive board this year. Tia Murphy could not be with us this evening, so in her place I have my vice chair, Judy Schweber. 2 weeks, so unfortunately she found out about 5 minutes ago she was going to be presenting the budget for this evening. But Tia did prepare a statement, so I'm going to have Judy start with that.
Okay, thank you. At the library, we have had a good year. We've increased our participation in programs in physical and digital circulation, as well as overall library visits. Our current objectives for the coming year include continuing to grow programming with a stronger emphasis on technology. To that end, we are looking to create a STEM lab for public use and programming, as well as repurposing areas within the library to make them more usable workspaces, all the while striving to keep expenses as flat as possible, looking to make more with the resources that we already have. Please note that the majority of library programming is funded by the Friends of the Bethel Public Library, private donations, grants, and partnerships. We are also focused on strengthening our partnerships with community organizations and the Bethel School District. Thank you for your continued support of the Bethel Public Library. Thank you.
Okay, so what you're going to see is the library is asking for just under a 2.5% increase for the next fiscal year. The two main areas which you're going to see the greatest increase are in salaries and in materials and supplies. So salaries being the first increase, that is based on potential contractual increases that will be coming our way in the next fiscal year. Then for the materials and supplies, that is physical books along with digital and electronic materials. And we did an increase of about 3% for that, taking into account that prices are going to go up in the next year. It's important that we recognize too that in the last year we've changed how we've done our purchasing and how we've gone about acquiring materials for the library. We now put a lot of emphasis in evaluating how we spend our money and the impact it's having on the community to ensure that the funds we use benefit as many people as possible. And you can see that within our statistics. If you look at the fact that we're one of the few libraries where physical circulation is starting to go up. Libraries across the country, including Bethel, have seen a trend of decrease in physical circulation, and in the last year with these changes we have seen a turnaround, and we're starting to see an increase again in those physical materials, as well as still maintaining a dramatic increase in digital materials. So I don't know if everybody had a chance to look over the narrative. If you'd like me to walk you through the narrative at this point, or if you'd like to ask questions.
Bless you. It seems like the salaries was really,
Yeah.
I mean, for books and materials, you're basically asking for an extra 3,200, right?
Yes.
I mean,
So
most of the increases were fairly nominal. I mean, the real drivers of salaries on this one, right?
we're making it a priority right now to see improvement without increasing cost. So the increases you do see are just to keep up with our salaries and increases in book material, but other than that, we're expanding our resources with what we do have.
What's your total budget, though, like including with donations and stuff that you actually bring in from all the people who help the library out?
I don't have that on hand right now,
That's all
but
right.
I can get that information.
I'm
for
just
you
curious,
this
I mean,
meeting.
because I know you have.
Well,
good
so,
support group.
for example, the Friends provide roughly $5,000 a year in programming costs, and that's what they give us at the start of their fiscal year. If we need more funding, we can make requests for that. They pay for specialty programming, like for our first library card program. So when a child or a teenager gets their first library card, they're also given a library bag and a book, and it is an incentive to continue coming in and to really present the library as a very friendly place. They pay for museum passes, which we circulate, which allow our patrons to go out to different museums and cultural organizations at a discounted price. Then they also help pay for enhancements. So one thing we are doing in the next year is improving our children's space, putting in a play area and reorganizing our bookcases in the front. None of that will come from tax dollars. That will all be through private donations and support from our friends.
So if I use an analogy, the Friends operate kind of like the way the Bethel Education Foundation does. So they
Yes.
provide grants for new things and extras, but not to offset the operating budget,
Mhm.
right? Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Good.
So for a library our size, $115,000 a year to buy new books and materials and things, do we have any benchmark as to whether that's average or high or low? Or?
We're about average. I wouldn't say we're low. It's also, we are looking at purchasing more digital content, so that does change how we do our purchasing, recognizing that not everybody is going to come into a physical building anymore. So how we're spending our money varies a little bit from how other libraries traditionally have. But I would say we are average for what we do with what we get and what we spend for our materials.
So when you say people can access the library by not coming physically into the building, what does that mean?
So it means that if you wanted a book to read while you're on the train, you could pull up your phone, download our app, and then pull up a book from our website. We're currently working on making it possible for you to download music from your device, for you to stream TV shows.
And that software is already in place, you can already access that?
So you can access books, magazines, newspapers,
I did most of
TV
my
shows.
college. For my master's, I used you guys. They have periodicals and peer reviewed, which is very
Yes.
important, so they can get you onto the state's website, which gives you like amazing stuff that you can't get. It's actually pretty cool. You just go online and pull everything up. 1 o'clock in the morning, you're working on stuff at your house. It's pretty awesome.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah.
We're recognizing also that there's a lot more recreational use that's happening now with libraries, and we want to make sure we accommodate that. We're looking now to expand into music as well. We have a very high demand in our community for music, which is surprising. It's not typically a trend you see. But we do circulate a lot of music. The problem is it takes up a lot of physical space. So now we're looking into transitioning to a digital option, which we feel, because most people, once they borrow our items, once they've listened to it and moved it to their device, it's not circulating again. So this will allow us to really focus on the real estate we do have for physical items and find a way to increase our circulation of these items without taking up space.
I just signed up for your library books.
Well, I expect to hear feedback.
What is the app? Yeah, what is it?
We have Libby.
So you download Libby?
Mm-hmm. Libby. And if you go to our website, you'll see a link on the side you can click on, and it'll take you right to the app. And it's wonderful because we have 2 different variations. We have Overdrive, and then we have Hoopla. Now, Overdrive is like your bestsellers, so we have to pay per copyright on those, but we share our contract with other libraries within the Bibliomation. So Bibliomation will take our annual fees, and then they'll negotiate licensing contracts so we get a better deal. From there, if we have community demands, or if the school, so in the last year we took over the school's Bibliomation platform. So now instead of them paying a platform fee and us paying a platform fee, we pay one platform fee and we house all of their content. And then when they have students who need materials, we can purchase them, and within minutes they then appear on that app and that student can download the book. Then Hoopla, but now, so that's copyright specific. So that means that it's the same as a physical item. One person can have a copyright at a time. Now with Hoopla, that's a pay-as-we-go resource. So if all of you wanted to read the same book at the same time, you could. So we would pay for that one-time license use as each person's using it. So it allows us to have instant access and then reserved access.
So how much of the 150 would you say is for like the digital kind of new age use of the library versus?
So right now we invest, so we invest about $10,000 in copyright licenses and pay-as-you-go. Then from databases, we commit, actually the numbers, I should type it there. So for e-content, we're looking at about $10,000. For databases, $22,000. And then some of our print purchases will also tie in with digital copyrights. So there is some funding in there as well.
Can you tell me a bit about your head count, how many librarians and other staff you have?
We have 22 employees.
22?
22. 8 of them are full-time. 4 of them, including myself, are MLSs, Masters of Library and Information Science. And then the other 4 are paraprofessionals, like administrative assistants, assistants of technology, outreach, and then the remainder are part-timers, and that is clerks and library assistants.
The part-timers, are they under the 20 hours so they don't receive any benefits?
Yes.
Okay.
Megan, let me ask you the question since I've got this.
I was waiting, go ahead.
You're waiting for my question. I know you've got training classes like 3D printing and computer. Do you charge for them at all?
No, and the reason we don't is we believe they've already paid for it through their taxes.
Oh, okay.
So technically, everyone has prepaid.
I got that reputation, but, okay. Overdue books. I know.
Yeah. And what's nice is we've changed some of our hiring in the last year, so we can do a lot more of that in-house though. So we're not paying outside groups to run computer classes. We design our own computer classes, we use the resources that are available to us for free, and we have a wonderful staff that's able to.
What about the community room? Do you rent that out, or do we just give it free for?
We have a policy, so if you're from out of town, then there's a rental fee. But
have you ever rented it yet?
While I've been here, no, it's been strictly non-for-profits and Bethel groups.
Again, looking
Yeah.
for revenues.
We, our community room fits about 65 max, so most organizations that would typically pay are looking for bigger spaces.
Okay.
So in terms of, I mean, I didn't know that you had all that digital access. That's really great. Do a lot of people know that? Is there a way for you guys to do more outreach and like push information to people in town? Did you guys know that? Did we all know that?
I did.
You know.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, like, is there a way to link something from the town site to the library? Is it already there and I don't know it? You know?
Well, that was one of the reasons we did the first step with merging with the schools, was because
That's
now that
great.
means every one of our students knows we have it, which means also then our hope is their parents will know we
No,
have
their
it.
parents don't know that.
Oh, we
I'm
do.
not here to tell you, unfortunately.
Um,
They don't tell us anything.
Well, as we get to the younger levels, hopefully that will change.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is, that goes back into our staffing. Another staff change we made in the last year was creating a library system of outreach. And their job is to go out into the community and sell our programs, our resources. And one of the first things they did was overhaul just our social media accounts. So you should all, if you have a Facebook or a Twitter account, go online, pull us up. And right off the bat, that's the first thing they did was change how we're communicating with people. So now, right now, we get people submitting book requests through Messenger, requests for programs. So now we're getting a lot more feedback that way. But what you're going to start to see over the next year or two is changes in how we market our materials.
So can I just make a small suggestion, which is since you've already partnered with the schools, you should ask them to put in their newsletters that they send out every Friday, a link to your website.
Okay.
Because that is something that parents read. Because I'm telling you, the kids don't tell us anything they don't absolutely have to tell us. But we would see that, and that is a great resource. And each school has a newsletter, and then there's a district newsletter too.
Yes, I confess I'm guilty of not always reading the district newsletter. But you know, I do receive them, so I understand that. All right, so, and we are working with the Chamber of Commerce now too to get our voice out there. So they have, the Chamber of Commerce works with a gentleman who runs the Gazette. I don't know if any of you have seen the printed newsletter that goes around now weekly. So we now have a section in that newsletter. So each week we can put a different topic in. So I'm hoping that over the course of 1 year we'll be able to cover all the different elements in the library. And I think that's a great way to get people to who are not interested in using social media, which is important to recognize that there are a lot of people out there who prefer not to go that route.
Are your librarians and paraprofessional people, do you have a contract with for their services, or how are they employed with the town? They're not in a union. Are they in a union or anything like that?
At the moment, they are working towards a union.
They're
So-
in negotiations.
Yes, thank you.
There was a vote about, what, a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, to join a union. That vote passed, but it hasn't been formalized yet. It's a negotiations.
Any more questions from the Board of Finance?
Any more questions, guys?
No.
Nope. No.
If you do have any other questions throughout this process, you can send them to Matt and forward them on to me.
I think you should send all of us a new application for library cards.
Be careful what you say. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Very excited about all the new stuff that you're doing.
Well, I look forward to being able to give you all a tour of our future makerspace.
Okay, cool. That's great.
Are we going?
Yes, great.
Let's see, Bob, Pat, are you gonna do the treasurer's thing or just leave it up to? Okay.
You don't want to do it?
No.
No? Okay. Let's do it.
All right, so you're gonna do treasurer, legal, IT?
Finance, probate, data processing, and town boards.
Okay,
Those 6.
all right.
So, the first account, treasurer, 110. We reduced the account by $500. Office expense, typically that's always been for postage, but $500 doesn't cover it in the finance department in postage. So we decided to take it out of the treasurer's department, because it would always go over, and then we have to stop charging it there and charge it to the office expense in the finance department. And I brought the $500 over to finance, and you'll see that in a second. But the salary is the salary, same as last year, $5,500, and that's the entire account.
Any questions?
Finance, total salary is $369,120.
Okay, hold on, I gotta get that. Okay. Thank you.
So the salaries, pretty much, the clerical union is the union that the employees belong to upstairs. The only increase that you would see in this particular account currently would be the increases from any step-in increases for them. Their union contract expires June 30th, so any increases that we're planning on with them is included in wage adjustments. And as far as Brad and myself, we're classified employees, and Matt determines at the start of the fiscal year whether or not we receive a raise and how much that raise is going to be. So that covers the salary part of it. Office expense, as I mentioned before, we moved the postage from treasurer over here, and with a minor increase because of the increase in postage, we increased it $3,500 to $4,100. General office supplies went up from $1,250 to $1,500, and the other two accounts, supplies and the annual report, stayed the same. So that account in total went from $5,150 to $6,000. The bulk of it being the $500 I came across from the treasurer's department. Dues and education the same at $2,000. Mileage the same at $400. So the total increase in the department has gone from, it's $74.24. It's gone from $442,814 to $450,238.
I want to point out one thing that's in the narrative on finance department. You'll see there's 12 functions in finance. There's actually a 13th that they forgot to put in, which is a formalized risk management department, which falls under Brad. And that's important because having a formal, proactive risk management function has saved us.
Well, last year,
we've had some decreases.
Kerma reduced our
insurance.
workers' comp by 7.5%, and this year they reduced it by another 5%. Yeah, so when you're looking at 7.5% of around $1 million, it's substantial. You know?
So yeah, that's a job change, an investment that's definitely paying off.
Any questions? The next account is professional services, which is the legal department, 160. The counselor's retainer, that's the town council. His retainer was $15,000, and it hasn't changed. The contract negotiations, we've got 3 contracts that are currently, will be under negotiations. We have that the same as last year, in at $20,000. Then legal fees. Historically, over the last 15 years, it's run about $188,000. 10-year average is about $191,000, and a 5-year average is $189,000. Last year, it was in at $150,000, and we decided to increase it to $175,000. If history's any indicator, that's probably on the low side, because it's going to be somewhere around $190,000. So.
Let me ask Matt a question on that. Do we have any major legal issues being pushed against us?
No, currently no, but keep in mind that we've got a charter revision underway, and they get their own attorney.
Right.
So there'll be a few $1,000s tied up in that.
But you also got.
It's mostly negotiations.
Well, the tax.
Whatchamacallit?
Oh, yeah, there is one major assessment appeal. It's moving through the court.
Okay, I know which one it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I forgot about that. You're right. Thanks, Brad.
So Bob, I'm sorry, again, on legal fees, if our best guess is that it's going to come in at 190. Is there a reason not to put it at 190? It's not a lot of money.
Like we said about the paramedics, we can move it up to 190. And then you can always decide later on when you deliberate whether or not you want to leave it at that or bring it down.
Guess I'd ask-
This past year, fiscal year 18 was at 185, 141.
I guess I'd ask my Board of Finance colleagues, what do we think? And again, it's not a lot of money, but if we're really kind of putting hand to heart as to whether or not this is our best guess, it seems like it's not a higher number.
So pretty much every year, we just take the extra money out of the general fund, it goes to there, and that's.
Well, normally what happens at the end of the year, if this account goes over, all right, we do the transfers like we did a month or so ago. And there's accounts that will have a surplus. And if this is in a deficit position, the surplus accounts covers the deficit accounts, and we're okay. We still have a surplus overall with all our expenses. So.
So then is there a reason to increase this, or just count on history as the best predictor of the future, and we'll have some accounts that are surplus and we'll use it for this?
Well, history would say it's 190.
So why not just, I agree that just put it at 190 and, you know, best evidence is that it should be 190, so why not put it there?
We can move that up and.
Yeah.
And then you can look at the overall budget and decide, you know, if you want to cut it or leave it alone.
Right.
Right. The last item in this budget is claims settlement. And this is out-of-court settlements for $3,000, but the two big ones are heart and hypertension settlement cases that we have to pay. We pay them every week. It depends on the case. One is $325 a week, the other one is $215, and that adds up to the $31,080. Next account is probate.
Are they long-term?
Yeah, let me just see.
Is there a forecast, you know, 20 years?
3 or 4 years left on them.
How many?
Yeah, 2027.
27.
27 is on one, and the other one, I don't have the end date on that.
I think one's up sooner than that.
I think it was
One,
2020.
yeah, the first one went from
2020.
300 to 325 in 2016. Probate has a minor increase of $296, and it's in the office expense. They're going from $39.01 to $41.97. And again, this account, the probate court is shared by Ridgefield, Reading, and Newtown. What she needs to do is buy 2 new fireproof file cabinets because she's run out of space upstairs. So that $296 represents buying 2.
That's our prorated share, right?
That's our prorated share. The proration is based on a head count.
Are the records not computerized? They're not digital?
No, there's hard copies that go into, yeah.
Some of it goes into the state system, but some of it, it's almost like what goes in our town clerk's vault. It has to be in a fireproof file up there. If I was a lawyer, I'd know more about that.
Hope the floor is sturdy enough to hold these file cabinets.
Did they ever clean the ones out in the back room that got moved over from the old town hall?
Which one?
Up in the probate area,
Yeah.
that back closet.
Oh, yeah, that's all done. And then there's a
That's all
closet
done.
in the hallway.
Okay.
That's where they're gonna put the new ones. Yeah.
How long do you have to keep those records for?
I don't know. I mean, with us, we have to apply to destroy any records to the state librarian. We detail what we need to destroy. It goes up there, and then they come back and they approve it or disapprove it. So I don't know if it's the case, similar to the case of like payroll records, where you pretty much have to keep them, you know, forever. Any questions? Next account, 190 data processing, or IT. We have the network administrator. Again, he's classified, and his salary increases are based on Matt's decision in July after the new fiscal year. So his salary is $69,323. Office expense in the account is $2,000, which is the same. Equipment maintenance is the same at $20,000. Professional services, we have the assistance of the Board of Ed. One of their, he basically is the supervisor for the network administrator there, and we share the salaries, and his piece is $25,000. And then we have $185,580 in contracted services, which is all of the different softwares that we have to maintain, update, pay the royalties on, the tax assessor, and
Tax collector.
yeah, the Public Works Department, Chris had mentioned before, some of his is in here. We have workstation updates, all the lease maintenance agreements for the copiers that we have in the building. That's all included in the $185,580. And we kept it the same amount.
I have a question about that. You know, we were talking about doing some remodeling down in the front foyer where there's some computer equipment, you know, where the bathrooms are in the front of the GP room.
Mhm.
There's a closet, I understand there, that has some computer equipment in there.
Brad would know better than me.
Uh,
Where the stuff is.
Do they still have stuff in there? They used to store stuff in there. That could be, if you let them know that you needed that closet tomorrow, then within a couple days they'll have it emptied out.
I thought there was some electronic equipment in there.
No, it's only storage. I don't think there's
storage.
any,
Oh,
like,
okay.
He does
servers or
have,
anything like that.
a closet somewhere with equipment, right? That's
Yeah,
operational?
yeah. He's got 3 or 4 classes throughout the building.
Yeah.
Tax collector's
But you don't
office.
think it's down in that area because we're.
I believe that's just storage.
Okay.
We can go look at it after this meeting if it's
Okay.
like he works.
Because we were talking about doing some remodeling there.
Yep.
So I don't know if it was gonna fall on the remodeling project to move it around or whatever. Okay. Thank you.
And the last account is 340, town boards and commissions. Let me just get to it. I think it's pretty much the same. I don't think there was any changes in there.
The only change in 340 is, that's where the legal fees for charter commission.
Exactly. It went from
Well,
10 to 12.5.
Yeah.
So there's a $2,500 increase. The account went from 56,750 to 59,250.
And that's just for.
That's it. Everything else stayed the same.
How's the historic information on that? Is that pretty much what it is?
Yeah.
Over
Yeah.
the years?
Well, it's on and off.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Since most of you guys are new, you guys have never heard my spiel on the IT budget, have you?
No, that was great.
Well, when Bob and I first started working on this back in 2010, we were paying an outside contractor. The email system didn't work. I used to get calls from people who'd say they were trying to send attachments like a form that the assessor needed, or if the form didn't get through, the resident would be charged a penalty. And I found out that our department, the system was so weak that our department heads were giving people their home email addresses, because that was the only way they could get an attachment through. There was no archiving system, which was required by law. All of our Microsoft products were unlicensed. We were like pirating an email system from a university.
But we saved a lot of money.
No, we didn't. We didn't.
No.
He was charging us.
Yeah, he was charging.
He was charging
right.
us like $150,000 a year. And
Yeah.
then, but that only gave us, I think, 20 hours a month.
Yeah, right.
Anything over that,
was
he had
extra.
a,
This will blow you away. In my first 6 months, I got a call one day from a woman who said, I'm out of state, I have to get my property declaration form to the assessor's office, and I keep sending it to her, and she says she never gets it, and I don't get a bounce back. So I went down to see the contractor, and I said, so what's going on with this? And he looks at her email address, and he says, oh, this is Gmail. Gmail's bad, we block all Gmail. And this is after I had come out of a corporate environment where, you know, I actually headed up a unit that did an IT upgrade, you know, a national upgrade. So, and I just couldn't believe it. We had,
We
Ann.
were buying machines, and he'd wipe everything off of it. I say, why are we doing that? Why are you taking everything off? And he was putting his own software on, which didn't have a tracking, old Windows program, so they couldn't track it. And it's like, because he didn't want to pay back then, they had a lease agreement with him to buy the computers, and this has to end. It was crazy.
Well, the day I started, I probably shouldn't go on. I will anyway. The day I started, I turned on the computer in the first selectman's office and it didn't go on. So I called the contractor, he said, oh no, that hasn't been on in 4 years. It doesn't work. I said, well, okay, well, I need to have a functioning computer and I need to be connected to the email server. So he drove down to Best Buy and bought a computer. And then back in those days, when you bought a home computer, you know, it had solitaire on it and video games. He spent 8 hours taking off all the stuff that came with it to set it up. It was, so when you look at that budget, just remember, it's lower than it used to be because it was just like salted away in all the different departments, piecemeal. Nothing communicated with one another. There were 4 different versions of Windows, not the NT system. They were all different.
Was this guy someone's relative?
No, it's just a network guy. You know,
I think back then the visiting nurse had them also. It
Yeah.
was bad.
well, you know, he was the nicest guy in the world. The system was outside of his
It just passed
area
him
of
by.
expertise. It just got
The
big.
profession passed him by.
Yeah.
He couldn't keep
So
up.
are we wrapped for today?
We need to adjourn.
Okay, so we need.
All right.
So, you know, Brad,
Motion to adjourn.
So
what
moved.
you did with the
Second.
police budget, what you did with the police budget where you uploaded the detail,
Yeah.
could you do that for the departments for tomorrow night and for Thursday night, whichever ones you have that kind of detail for?
I don't know if we have some of the details.
Some of them did it. The police always does his own ahead of time. He has his own template, which is similar to ours. I'll check. I mean, if we have anything along those lines, we'll give you what we have. But not all the departments did it that way.
It's just hard to look at a total salary number and not know any detail behind it, or a total capital, or, you know, and not know any detail. Like, and while they're telling us while we're asking, when we go into deliberations, are we all gonna remember what was said? Like, we're gonna need some more detail on that stuff.
It'll
For
certainly
the
come
bigger
up into
questions.
discussion, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
What's that?
It'll certainly come into discussion with Bob here, being here, and Brad.
Yeah.
We'll see what we have for tomorrow and upload those items.
That'd be great, thank you.
Yeah.
So entertain a motion to adjourn for the Board of Finance.
Move to adjourn?
I second that.
Vote all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We already did. What were you guys talking
Yeah.
about? We adjourned.
We're efficient.
Good night, everybody. See you
Good
tomorrow.
night, guys.
You want to hear another funny one?
Oh, I'm here.
Ann Skako came into my, oh,